Hey y'all, welcome back to another new video. So today we are doing part 2 of the first Wizarding War series. So if you haven't seen part 1, make sure you go back and watch that, or the timeline won't make perfect sense for you. So where our story picks up is when Tom Riddle is entering his 4th year at Hogwarts. So in his 4th year, Riddle finally figures out his magical ancestry by using his middle name, Marvolo, which was his maternal grandfather's name. And so this is how he discovers the Gaunt family. And he also finds out that the Gaunts descended from Slytherin's family, so are descendants of Salazar Slytherin. And so this explains to him why he's able to speak Parseltongue, because he knows even for talented magical people, speaking Parseltongue is still pretty rare. So that answers that question for him. And additionally, at this time in his schooling, a rumor is going around that Hogwarts had a Chamber of Secrets left by Salazar Slytherin that only his heir would be able to open. And so Riddle realizes that this means that he is the heir of Slytherin, and if he were to find the chamber, if it is real, then he would be able to open it. And so he becomes obsessed with finding it, and he spent most of his 5th year, so a year later now, searching for the entrance, despite most of his peers believing it's just like a rumor or a legend. And at the end of his 5th year, his hard work is paid off because he does discover the entrance in the girls' bathroom, which leads down into the sewers, underneath the lake, and to the Chamber of Secrets. So he enters the Chamber of Secrets and finds the basilisk, which is like 1,000 years old, and it confirms his connection to Salazar Slytherin, that he is the heir. And so on June 13th, 1943, Riddle unleashes the basilisk into Hogwarts to, purge the school of Muggle-born students, and several were petrified, and one, Myrtle Warren, was killed. And she was Riddle's first murder victim. And on a TikTok, when I said that, some people were like, well, technically Tom Riddle didn't murder her, the basilisk did. And I guess kind of, but he was controlling the basilisk. So I would say that Tom Riddle killed her, in my opinion. And this attack prompted the then headmaster, Armando Dippet, and the Hogwarts Board of Governors to discuss closing the school because of safety issues, obviously, like a student died. And this would mean that Riddle would have to return to the Wolves Orphanage, which obviously he hates and really doesn't want to. So he abandons the chamber, decides he's not gonna let the snake out again, and he actually frames Hagrid, who was only a 3rd year at the time. And Hagrid was like the perfect victim for this framing because he was raising this giant spider, which is called an acromantula. And so, he made himself kind of the perfect victim for this. And so that was Aragog, obviously. So Hagrid was expelled for this, and Dumbledore actually trusted Hagrid and didn't think that he did it. And also, people didn't think that Hagrid killed these people on purpose. So they didn't think he was like a cold-blooded murderer. So Dumbledore requested that he was able to stay on the grounds and be trained to be the groundskeeper, and Dippet agreed because, like I said, obviously they had to punish Hagrid for doing this, but they didn't think he did it on purpose, in cold blood or whatever. So Dippet did award Riddle an award for special services to the school for this, which obviously we see in the Harry Potter series. And Riddle's fear of death was worse than ever after kind of staring it in the face, seeing Myrtle die. And so he used the death of Myrtle to turn his old school diary into his first Horcrux. And he had learned about this method from a book in the library's restricted section called Secrets of the Dark Arts. And also in conjunction with some information he had charmed out of a Slughorn. And this is before he, asks him about splitting his soul into multiple pieces. And so Riddle was really talented, so he was sort of able to learn how to do it just from reading about it because he was just that smart and talented. Okay, so fast forward a couple months to August of 1943, and Riddle tracks down his Gaunt relatives in Little Hangleton, and he meets his uncle, Morfin Gaunt, who told him all about his dad leaving his mom to die and abandoning them in the orphanage. And this is obviously, not even really what happened. He left out that his mom had used a love potion on his dad. So it was obviously a really biased account of events. But nonetheless, this just made Tom Riddle hate his father even more. And so he wanted revenge. And like I said, remember in the last video that Tom Riddle's dad, so Tom Riddle Sr., and the Gaunts live in the same village. So he was able to just walk right over to the Riddle house, and he killed his dad and both of his grandparents on his paternal side, and then framed Morfin for it by putting him under a false memory charm. And so Morfin confessed because he thought he did it and was sentenced to life imprisonment in Azkaban for this. And in the Muggle community, Frank Bryce, the Riddle's caretaker, was suspected of the murders but was never convicted. But like the townspeople kind of thought he did it. And Riddle stole Morphin's ring, which nobody knew. Tom didn't know, Morphin didn't know, actually had the resurrection stone in it, and he started to wear it as like a trophy. And then Riddle returns to Hogwarts for his 6th year the following month, acting like he didn't just kill how many people? Like
3?
Yeah, 3 plus Myrtle, so 4 people now. And this is the year he discusses the theoretical idea of creating 6 Horcruxes, so 7 pieces of his soul, with Slughorn. And I have a whole TikTok on why the number 7 is significant in both like Harry Potter lore, but also just in the world in general, and that might help you understand like why 7 was so important to him. And this is when he has that conversation with Slughorn. And Slughorn was really taken aback, but answered his questions anyways, because, like I said, Riddle had really charmed most of the teachers, so Slughorn obviously probably did believe that he just wanted to know. And obviously we know that Slughorn feels very, very horrible and guilty about what he told him. But I mean, truth be told, I feel like Riddle would have figured it out even if Slughorn hadn't told him. So Riddle then uses the death of his father to turn the ring into a Horcrux. So that's his second one. Okay, so now the year is 1945, and remember, we know Dumbledore does not trust Riddle, and this is actually the same year that Dumbledore defeats Grindelwald in a duel, which I feel like a lot of people don't realize how the end of Fantastic Beasts coincides with sort of the start of Harry Potter. So now Dumbledore has the Elder Wand, and Grindelwald goes to prison for life at Nuremberg, which is the prison in Austria, and this ends the Global Wizarding War. So Global Wizarding War is over in 1945, and Riddle graduates this same year, and he immediately applies for the position of Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, because the previous teacher, Galatia Merrythought, just like retired or vacated her position for whatever reason. And Dumbledore convinces Headmaster Dippet not to give it to him, because like I said, Dumbledore doesn't trust him. And, you know, Dumbledore has a lot of clout right now, so, like, people are going to listen to what he says. And so Dippet politely turns down Tom, saying that he was just too young. Like, he didn't tell him, we don't trust you, you know? And he told him to reapply in a few years. And so towards the end of his time in school, so I guess I'm kind of backtracking a little bit, he'd become interested in learning about Hogwarts relics, specifically relics that had once belonged to the 4 founders. And so he had learned from the Grey Lady who he charmed, so Helena Ravenclaw, the daughter of Rowena, that Ravenclaw's diadem was hidden in a forest in Albania inside of a hollow tree. And it was there. Some people were like, how did it get there? So if you look at the story of the Grey Lady, Helena, she was killed in an Albanian forest, and she had stolen her mother's diadem and taken it there, and she was actually killed by the Bloody Baron. So that's how the diadem ended up in Albania. So after being rejected from the Defense Against the Dark Arts position, he traveled there and retrieved it, and he used the murder of like a random Albanian peasant to turn the diadem into his 3rd Horcrux. And so then he returns to England after this, and he was offered several positions at the British Ministry of Magic, but he turned all of them down and actually began working at Borgin and Burke's, which I'm sure some people viewed as a waste of his talents, just being like a shopkeeper. But he was using this to, so Borgin and Burke's is a dark arts shop in Knockturn Alley, ran at the time by Caradicus Burke, and he was just using this position to learn more about the dark arts. And he ended up befriending, well, like a fake friendship, you know, a one-sided friendship with Hepzibah Smith, who was a really wealthy old antique collector and a descendant of Helga Hufflepuff. And okay, so now sometime between 1955 and 1961, JKR has never given us like an exact year, Riddle visits Hepzibah's house to negotiate a price on some goblin-made armor. And she shows him that she actually owns Hufflepuff's cup and Slytherin's locket, and these are her like most prized possessions. And I don't know if Riddle knew this, but the locket was actually one of the things that his mom had stolen from her family and sold to Borgin and Burke's back when she was like destitute. And so that's actually how Hepzibah like bought it, which is interesting. And so obviously Riddle wants these things because they're Hogwarts relics, and he's like a selfish jerk. So 2 days later he uses a little known poison and kills her, and he frames her house elf Hokey by putting her under a false memory charm as well. And luckily little Hokey was only convinced of accidental manslaughter, because they thought, you know, house elves are too dumb to purposefully kill somebody. So I don't think Hokey ends up in jail or anything.
Oh.
Riddle immediately resigns from his job and uses the murder of Hepzibah as his fourth Horcrux for the cup. And then he kills a muggle, and JKR used the word tramp, which I don't know what that means, a prostitute from London. I'm assuming that's what that means, for his fifth, which is the locket. That is actually where I'm going to end off now. And so make sure you come back in a few days to learn what happens next in Tom Riddle's life. And if you want to see Harry Potter content every single day, follow me on TikTok. Oh, and a lot of times people ask like where I get this information. So the information from this series is actually coming from a variety of different sources. So a lot of it is actually included in the Harry Potter series, but it's very like scattered, and we don't get it in like a nice timeline like this. We just get little bits of information here and there. So this is, I kind of put it into a nicer timeline. And then some of it is from Fantastic Beasts. And then any like gaps that were left over are things that have been filled in by JKR in either original writings that she's done for the Wizarding World website, or companion books, or interviews, or blah, blah, blah. But most of it is actually from the Harry Potter series or the Fantastic Beasts series. So yeah, and until next time, bye y'all.